When I went home during the spring festival, in order to prevent blind dates, I rented a fake boyfriend to deal with my parents. We behaved intimately at the dinner table, and managed to fool my parents and me. Bamboo horse. After sending off my fake boyfriend that night, the cold bamboo horse, who had been drinking all night, suddenly pushed me against the wall. His eyes were red, and he said word by word, "As soon as you smile at him, I'm going crazy." On the eve of the winter break of my junior year, my mom consulted me again about my relationship status. There are 3 unfilial pieties, and no queen is great. What's more, my mother's feat is solo so far. My mother was anxious and said that if I couldn't find the object again, I would print my QR code business card, scan the code in the blind date corner, and send eggs to my friends for free. I was helpless, and my roommate Eve Cat gave me a tip: haven't you always had a crush on your bamboo horse? Just ask him for help and see if he's interested in you. I gave her a suspicious look. Is this okay? She patted me on the chest and said in a very determined tone, "Anyway, I think he must be interesting to you. Whether he can pierce the window paper between the 2 of you, it's up to you to hit Zora Barney." I was so excited by what she said. I opened Weshit and was about to send a message to Justin Faulkner, when my mother's message came first. Worried Bernice, I just asked Justin Faulkner about that kid. He has a girlfriend for his cold nature. Baby, when can you get a boyfriend back for me? Bang! My brain buzzed. Fingertips froze in mid-air. The words on the screen faded into a trance. Justin Faulkner. Does he have a girlfriend? This position lasted for an unknown amount of time. Eve Cat was lying in bed and excitedly asked me if Justin Faulkner said yes. Got no response for half a day. When I looked down, I froze in place as if I had lost my soul. She leaned on the edge of the bed and called my name blankly. I tilted my head, my eyelashes wet. A pair of eyes met her. Tears welled up uncontrollably like a flood that burst the embankment. Eve Cat. Justin Faulkner. He has a girlfriend. What am I going to do? MO for 2 days. And my whole body was visibly languishing. Holding the phone, sighing all day long. It used to be 3 times a day, but now it's 5 times a day. Vainly trying to numb oneself with eating. In the middle of the night, Eve Cat couldn't stand it after I finished her last pack of spicy noodles. The little hand clapped, pouting for the last meal before the holiday in the 416 dormitory tomorrow. I touched the pimple on my chin and tearfully agreed. At the end of the dinner, they took me to the mall, and after some shopping, each of us walked out of the clothing store with a large bag and a small bag. I hadn't taken a few steps before Eve Cat suddenly elbowed me and whispered, "Oops, Zora Barney, look at the baby on the right." "Why, are you Zuma and his girlfriend?" I suddenly honked the alarm bell, and I quickly glanced to the right without moving. Justin Faulkner stood next to the crane machine with his hands in his pockets. His eyebrows were cold, and the woman next to him was thin and small, with white blonde hair shining all over. And after not picking up the doll again, he muttered to grab Justin Faulkner's arm. Justin Faulkner didn't refuse her physical contact, threw in 2 game coins, and picked up a doll in 3 clicks, and the girl applauded and laughed brightly. Eve Cat saw that my expression was wrong, and immediately changed her words. "Maybe it's not my girlfriend. I'll ask for a Weshit to help you test it. Don't go." I grabbed her, turned around and put on my hat and mask, bowed my head and bent over, and cautiously retreated in the opposite direction. "If you provoke me, they can be regarded as kicking cotton." The other 2 roommates didn't understand but respected, and the cat followed behind my ass. A few people sneak into a jewelry store. I crouched in the doorway and poked my head out, and the 3 of them craned their necks to follow me. Justin Faulkner, on the other side, seemed to notice something, and looked sideways at us. I was so frightened that I got to my feet, and my skull was firmly on the chin of the man above my head. 4 screams in succession attracted people's attention. Eve Cat rubbed her chin and lifted me up, puzzled. "It's not us. Why are you running? Are you really willing to give up your bamboo horse to someone else?" I shook my head and nodded. "Unjustifiably strong, although I like him. I have a bottom line." I paused and added, "My mom won't let me be a junior." The 3 of them exchanged glances with each other, and the next second, they took 2 steps back at the same time. I instantly felt isolated. Eve Cat stood a meter away and said in hatred, "So you're going to give up?" I didn't say anything. Growing up, I only thought about whether Justin Faulkner would like me, and I never thought that Justin Faulkner would like someone else. But that scene just now made me realize the reality. I'm dead. After all these years, if he really liked me, we should have been together a long time ago. It's always been me stalking and self-inflicted. I closed my eyes and secretly made up my mind that this was the end of my crush. When I did, I yelled at them and swore to them, if I like Justin Faulkner again, Zora Barney, I'm a dog. Not long after returning to the dormitory, Justin Faulkner sent a message. You went out in the afternoon. I seemed to see you. I didn't want to deny it directly. No, you read it wrong. After a long silence, Justin Faulkner sent another message. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock high-speed rail. Remember to pack things. Don't leak them. Every holiday, I rushed to help Justin Faulkner grab a ticket, just to be able to sit with him for a while. This time was no exception. I managed to grab the next seat, but I don't want to sit anymore. I have something to do tomorrow. I changed the ticket. You go back first. Justin Faulkner immediately snapped a question mark. I turned off my phone and ignored him. My mom saw the stitches and came over to ask me about my relationship status. I scratched my head in annoyance, and my eyes for help fell on Eve Cat, who was chasing the show next to me. Eve Cat saw that I had made up my mind to give up on Justin Faulkner, and the big eyes of wisdom closed and opened. After a while, I came up with a bad idea. Why don't you rent a fake boyfriend online, and take home a meal to solve your parents? I gasped and smacked my lips. How dare you think about it? She squinted at me with disdain, and the old god was saying, coward, why don't you dare to do this? There are many people on the internet. As a result, Eve Cat spent a night with me on the internet and finally settled on a boy from the same school. Said that he was afraid that I would be deceived, and the same school would come to clean up. The fake boyfriend's name is Virgil Pepis, and he is of the same class as me, tall, handsome, and with a good personality. It is the type that many girls will like at a glance. Eve Cat also told me that Virgil Pepis is now the president of the roller skating club, and that she had a crush on the club for a long time when she joined the club in her freshman year. I didn't expect such an excellent man to be able to rent. It's so cheap. If she didn't already have a boyfriend, she would have wanted to rent it for 2 days. Virgil Pepis and I quickly exchanged WeChat messages, and after getting to know each other briefly, I shared some words with him to deal with my parents. 2 days later, go home on the high-speed train. Virgil Pepis sat next to me. The first time I went home with a guy other than Justin Faulkner, I had a feeling I couldn't put into words. Virgil Pepis himself looks even better than in the photos, with delicate and snow-white skin, and delicate and three-dimensional facial features. The smooth line is clearer than my life plan. Fortunately, he is not as cold as Justin Faulkner, and he has always taken the initiative to find topics and take care of my emotions throughout the whole process. When I met a girl on WeChat, he would look at me, and then smile, and say sorry. The acting was so good that it gave me the illusion that we were really in love. After arriving home, my parents liked him even more, serving him with delicious food and drink, and holding people's hands for a long time. I was afraid that Virgil Pepis would accidentally show the stuffing somewhere, so I followed him wherever he went. Once, he went to the toilet and I followed. As a result, the foot just stepped in and didn't hit the ground. My mom suddenly appeared, grabbed my ears and took me out and asked my dad, your little padded jacket can't be a love brain, right? Virgil Pepis has to follow up on the toilet. Then he poked my finger in the head and teased, what, you still want to untie Simone's belt? I blushed with embarrassment and tried desperately to explain. Virgil Pepis leaned against the door and looked at me, his shoulders shaking with laughter. After that, I didn't dare to follow him casually. It wasn't until dinner started that my mom asked me to call Justin Faulkner downstairs to eat together. After I refused to no avail, I scrambled to pull Virgil Pepis for emergency training. For the sake of face, I never mentioned Justin Faulkner to him. Virgil Pepis looked down at my babbling mouth with a soft expression. In the middle of the night, Eve Cat's low male voice suddenly sounded. You like him, don't you? Heh. I was stunned. He looked at him stunned. In the quiet of the night, his eyes were bright and gentle, mixed with a bit of inexplicable sadness. After a moment, he was the first to look away, breaking the silence with a chuckle. Okay, I remember everything. He's your childhood sweetheart. He half pushed me out, whispering, "Go and call him." I blinked and answered dryly, closed the door and went upstairs absent-mindedly. Justin Faulkner's house is upstairs from my house, and his parents have been busy with work since he was a child, and they rarely come home, so he basically eats together at my house. Standing at the doorway for almost a minute, I couldn't knock it down with my raised hand. I was about to take out my mobile phone and send a "Wish it" message, when the door in front of me suddenly opened. Justin Faulkner wears a black puffer jacket, with a zipper that reaches to his chest. A little bit of a white t-shirt neckline, and a nice craggy collarbone are exposed. A thin and slender hand is carrying a plastic bag. As soon as he saw me, his eyes suddenly brightened a little, but he quickly suppressed them again. The two were speechless for a while, and the atmosphere was a little delicate. I slowly pulled a stiff smile from the corner of my mouth, and my brain spun quickly. "You want to throw out the garbage that my mother asked me to tell you to go down to dinner? I'll leave first." As soon as the words landed, I immediately turned around and tried to escape. Before the front foot could step out, the back foot was grabbed by the wrist. Justin Faulkner was silent for a few moments, staring at the side of my face, and his voice tightened. "Zora Barney, are you hiding from me?" I swallowed. The heart pounded and beat wildly, thinking of something. He struggled to shake off his hand, and took a few steps back to distance himself. "The heart is turbulent, but the surface is calm. You think too much." As he spoke, Justin Faulkner's eyes sank suddenly. His eyes were fixed on the hand that had just been thrown away by me, and his face was a little pale. After a few seconds, my gaze slowly shifted from bottom to top to my near detached face. He hooked his lips, but it didn't look like he was smiling. The hoarse voice trembled slightly. "You're lying." I was stunned by his staring. Panicked, he staggered his gaze and casually dropped, "I'll go back first." Greased the soles of his feet, turn around and run. Without giving him a chance to breathe, the man behind me looked at my back, his empty hand clenched gloomily, and after a moment he sighed silently, finally escaping his sight. My hanging heart finally landed safely. Justin Faulkner, it's weird today. He didn't really want to talk to me before, and every time I took the initiative to find a topic, but as soon as I looked at him just now, I couldn't help but be stunned. The strange idea that I seemed to be cheating on me, keeping my husband in the dark, and being caught red-handed kept popping up in my head, inexplicably saddled with the sin of a bad woman. But I was really full of guilt in my heart. No, what kind of weakness do I have? I kicked the pebbles at the top of the stairs in frustration. Obviously, he had a girlfriend first, and now he is still pulling with me. I just found a fake boyfriend to deal with the family. Why did he look at me with that kind of dead look? Scold. A scheming man. He wouldn't want to step on two boats, would he? In just a few seconds, I've already made up a bloody drama in my brain. At last, before entering the door, I looked upstairs and sighed, gritted my teeth and said, "Phew, scumbag." When I got home, I just closed the door. Virgil Pepis, who had been watching the show with my mother, turned around and got up almost at the same time. Stop in front of me and look at me, from head to toe. Seeing that my hair was just a little messy, Woozy breathed a sigh of relief. The voice-activated light in the hallway suddenly went out. The dark shadow in front of him was blurry and tall, and the sporadic incandescent light from the living room hit his thin and sharp side face. In the dim light, Virgil Pepis raised his hand, and pressed down the few hairs I had just grabbed, and I didn't react for a moment, blinked, staring blankly at him. After a while, his gaze gradually shifted down to meet mine. After being stunned for a moment, he withdrew his hand in a panic. Coughing lightly, he touched the tip of his nose and explained, Your hair is messed up." The voice-activated lights suddenly lit up. Virgil Pepis' fair skin quietly floated pink under my eyes. I can see it clearly. My mom looked at us, with her face on her face, and she didn't even bother watching the TV. And she laughed so happily. The corners of his mouth are grinning to his temples. I pursed my lips and stared at the base of his red ears. The eyebrows and eyes are slightly curved, and a bright smile opens. "Thank you," I say. He was slightly stunned for a moment, and then dropped a sentence with an unnatural expression. "You're welcome." Hurriedly turned around and poured a large mouthful of water. I watched his somewhat floating footsteps, and sighed silently in my heart. Woo. His acting skills are really good. My hundreds of oceans are not in vain. A few minutes later, There was a knock on the door. My mom pushed me and told me to open the door for Justin Faulkner. With a reluctant face, I was about to get up. Virgil Pepis, who was beside him, stood up first and smiled at us. "I'll go." Before I could react, he had already walked to the door. Without a trace of hesitation, he opened the door directly. It gives me the feeling that I'm in a hurry but don't know what I'm anxious about. As soon as the door opened, a wave of cold air hit. The lights are on. After someone outside the door saw him, his already emotionless face suddenly became a little more colorful. Justin Faulkner froze, staring at Virgil Pepis, who was standing in front of him, and his expression suddenly became grim. The dark eyes were full of inquiry. The two sides looked at each other, and neither let anyone. I had a faint smell of gunpowder. Moments later, Virgil Pepis was the first to break the silence. Raising an eyebrow, he held out his hand to Justin Faulkner. "Hello, you're Zora Barney." He paused for a few seconds and added with a smile, "I'm Virgil Pepis, Zora Barney's boyfriend." Before he could finish speaking, Justin Faulkner's pupils on the other side shrank, as if he had just woken up from a big dream. On Ruia's flawless face, a rare complex look appeared, and finally restrained and calmed down, to the extreme, calm. But after hearing the word, boyfriend, his desperate efforts to restrain his suppressed emotions just now fell short. Justin Faulkner's face sank completely, his jaw line tightened, and his eyes were cold. I yelled inwardly that I was not good, and I hurriedly got up to pull Virgil Pepis over. Virgil Pepis, still with a clean and innocuous smile on his face, ignored his cold face and handed his right hand back to Justin Faulkner. I rushed over and reached out to grab it. Justin Faulkner snapped my hand away, caught a void. The air was suddenly eerily quiet. Feeling the cold, piercing gaze from the opposite side, I retracted my claws almost instantly. Virgil Pepis was so hurt that he complained to me, "Zora Barney, he's so fierce. Good guy. Why didn't I find out that you still have green tea attributes?" I laughed dryly twice and agreed, "He's like that. You just get used to it." Justin Faulkner lowered his eyes, and a very soft laugh escaped from his throat. After a moment, he looked up at me, gritted his teeth and repeated, "Boyfriend." His gaze was fixed on my face, as if trying to find the slightest unnatural look in it to prove that I had lied. I started to get scared again, but he still pretended to be calm, pretended to be familiar with the arm of the person beside him, and looked up and smiled at him. Virgil Pepis then looked down at me with affection. The eyes are rolling, so gentle. Justin Faulkner knows it, frozen in place, staring at us coldly, his face a little pale. I took it and turned to flee the Shura field, but Virgil Pepis grabbed me by the wrist and dragged me back. I didn't stand still and almost fell into his arms. Virgil Pepis put his arm around my waist, his eyes lit up, and he said, "Zora Barney, why don't you call me baby?" I gasped and glanced at Justin Faulkner, and before I could probe his emotions, Justin Faulkner pushed Virgil Pepis away and passed between us. With what I've known about him for so many years, he was angry. It's not good to coax it for 10 days and half a month. I slapped my head helplessly and glared viciously at Virgil Pepis, the little green tea, before he approached him. Seeing that he was about to speak again, I immediately covered his mouth and begged for mercy in his ear. "Virgil Pepis is okay. It's okay. No matter how well you act, I still won't overpay you. You die." Virgil Pepis hooked his lips and snorted, his eyes lowered, and his tone was tinged with helplessness. "Why are you so stupid?" I didn't hear clearly, and tried to grab his arm, and make him say it again. Lang Buting met the gaze of someone not far away. Suddenly, I reflexively retracted my claws. It's scary. How can a human look be so human? I felt like Justin Faulkner was about to eat me alive with his eyes. I let out a long sigh, and sighed silently in my heart. This time, it seems that it is really big. After the dishes were served, my mother immediately sat down to eat. I sat on the couch and didn't move, quietly observing the situation on the field. In the last second, Justin Faulkner sat uncharacteristically next to my mom in a rare way. The next second, Virgil Pepis narrowed his eyes and turned to wave at me. The tone was spoiled. "Zora Barney, it's time to eat Tilda." My elbow on the couch jerked. She was because his tone was too intimate, and my face turned red to the base of my ears. Everywhere it went, it suddenly heated up. I didn't start coughing a few times, and walked over briskly with an embarrassed face. Justin Faulkner's back stiffened and didn't look at us the whole time. I pouted, and Virgil Pepis hesitated for a long time, and finally sat down next to Justin Faulkner, and patted the chair on his left. I sat down obediently with crooked eyebrows. As soon as I looked up, Justin Faulkner's gaze on me hurriedly looked away, and then opened a bottle of beer and drank it without expression. I have mixed feelings. Is he thirsty? Or is he jealous? At the dinner table, Virgil Pepis kept serving me food. What about me? Adhering to the principle of being a man with a full set of acts, he gave me one, and I had to pay him back too. And with the sentence, "Baby, eat more," double the effect. The two of us said a word, and after a while, the bowl was sharp. My mother couldn't take care of the CP meal on the spot, and stared at the two of us and snickered. Later, my dad couldn't hold back his cough several times. One voice is louder than the other. I just coughed my old face red. I heard that something was wrong, put down my chopsticks, and reached out to give him a smooth back. But he was politely rejected by his old man's feet. He lip-synched with me, almost. The translation is, "Don't force me to slap you." I smiled and exchanged glances with Virgil Pepis. After that, the two of us didn't dare to serve each other's food again. During our intimate interaction, Justin Faulkner's eyes were dark, and he kept his head down and drank. There were several times when I couldn't help but look up at me, and the next second it would bounce back again, and I drank more violently than before. I tilted my head at him uncomfortably. Justin Faulkner hung his head, his eyelashes trembling, and his cold complexion was stained with a blush from alcohol. "It's cold, and it seems to be a lot smoother." Seeing that he had been drinking and not eating, my mother frowned, and sandwiched several pieces of meat for him one after another. He nagged, "You kid, how can you just drink wine and not eat food? It's all people who have girlfriends, and I don't know yet. Take care of yourself." Justin Faulkner's fingertips pinched the can suddenly, and the next second, suddenly looked at me. Before I could withdraw my gaze, I was caught off guard and crashed into his blurred eyes. I was slightly stunned, bowed my head in a hurry, and didn't think about stuffing several mouthfuls of food into my mouth. I was choked and coughed because I was in such a hurry to eat. Justin Faulkner looked nervous, put down the can and was about to do something. Virgil Pepis, who was next to me, reached out and patted me on the back, and when I stopped coughing, he ran to get me a glass of warm water and handed it to me. I blushed and said, "Thank you." Justin Faulkner took a deep look at Virgil Pepis, then withdrew his gaze and ate the braised pork in his bowl. I don't know if it's my delusion, but I have a vague feeling that he is less hostile to Virgil Pepis. After dinner, Virgil Pepis was called by my dad to the study for a heart-to-heart talk. Justin Faulkner was about to leave when his mother dragged him to the couch and sat down. Before I could breathe a sigh of relief, the sofa next to me sank slightly, and then a faint and crisp scent of pine, mixed with wine, surrounded me. Justin Faulkner was so close that I could clearly see the little mole at the end of his eye. He looked sideways at me slightly, his Adam's apple rolling up and down. The drunken eyes were slightly drunk, and the blurred peach blossom eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist. Soon, he took the lead in looking away, and silently moved to the side. Distanced, I blinked, and my heart was not good. My mom gossiped about seeing a picture of his girlfriend, saying that she was a staff officer for him. Justin Faulkner never dared to resist my mom, so he took out his phone and opened a photo and handed it to her. I was sitting in a precarious position, and I didn't dare to come out. Both eyes slanted uncontrollably towards my mom. I only heard my mother's "oh yo-yo" several times, and I held the phone and looked at it for a long time, and finally returned the phone to him with satisfaction. The phone screen was on, and I pretended to glance back inadvertently, only to be ruthlessly extinguished by Justin Faulkner. With a blank face, he put his phone back in his pocket, didn't look at me again, and got up to say goodbye to my mom. My mother liked him and happily sent him to the door, and watched him go upstairs before closing the door. She turned her head, and my face suddenly zoomed in front of her eyes. "I'm a good girl. You want to scare your mother to death." Bernice was stunned, and pinched 2 fingers to grip my face. I immediately begged for mercy, pouting and looking pitiful. She softened, glared at me angrily, and pushed me away with disgust on her face. I immediately stuck it back like a dogskin plaster, and muttered in her ear, "Justin Faulkner, What does his girlfriend look like? Can you tell me, Tilda? My mom replied without hesitation. Much prettier than you. You don't have a chance. What are these words? Unconvinced, I crossed my waist and asked her, are you my mother? Realizing that something was wrong, I frowned and added, oh no. What do you mean I don't have a chance? My mom bluntly debunked me. You haven't always liked Justin Faulkner, and your dad and I were both very optimistic about you. As a result, Justin Faulkner said that I didn't believe that I had a girlfriend, and I just saw the photo and I just… Stop. I interrupted her, furrowed my eyebrows, and asked, how do you two know? My mother gave me a blank look. Do you think your mother has watched so many TV dramas for nothing? I've seen through your little thoughts. I was blindfolded again, and just as I was about to ask further, Virgil Pepis came out of the study. My open mouth immediately closed. My mom glared at me and greeted me with a smile. Virgil Pepis softened, clenching his hands in the corners I couldn't see. Not long after that, Virgil Pepis suddenly went out to answer a phone call, and came back with an ugly face. Virgil Pepis told us that his grandfather had a heart attack, and was not doing well and might have to go back early. The incident happened suddenly, and my parents couldn't keep it after hearing it, so they could only silently pray that his grandfather was safe. While waiting for Virgil Pepis, he looked up at the moon and hesitated for a long time before saying, he likes you very much. Me. Heh. Before we could ask him, the taxi stopped in front of us with a double flash. Virgil Pepis looked down at me, his eyes clear and bright, his throat rolled, and the wind blew through him, with his gentle voice and good smell. Zora Barney, can I hold you? He asked. I nodded my head grimly. The next second, Virgil Pepis wrapped his long arms around me, and gently embraced me into his arms, moving gently to the bone. The moon glowed with a cold light, but my heart was throbbing. I seemed to suddenly understand something. After sending Virgil Pepis away, my mind was dizzy and I couldn't calm down for a long time. On the stairs home, I snapped back to what Virgil Pepis had just said. He likes you very much. That him? Is it Justin Faulkner? Thinking like this, I didn't even notice that I had gone up an extra staircase. It wasn't until I closed the door, and turned around to see the interior in the faint moonlight that I realized it later. I went to the wrong house. This is Justin Faulkner's home. Why didn't he turn on the lights and lock the door? In the darkness, I heard the man's low panting. I moved to the wall in small steps, and cautiously felt for the button to turn on the light. Click. My eyes lit up, and I tentatively shouted, Justin Faulkner, is that you? There was the sound of bottles rolling on the outdoor balcony. I looked out through the light of the living room, and saw Justin Faulkner's back. On the cold night, when the cold was raging, there were wine bottles around him, and the whole person sat on the ground, his elbows on the ground, and his long legs, that had nowhere to be placed, were bent at will. When he heard the movement, he tilted his head to look at me, and his eyes suddenly lit up, shattering with starlight, like a lazy and noble big cat. My heart was sluggish and I was shot empty. Thinking of something, the light in his eyes gradually went out. He lowered his head and poured another big sip of wine, quietly looking downstairs, his superior facial features hidden in the darkness that the light could not reach. I followed his line of sight and saw the tree where Virgil Pepis and I were just standing waiting for the bus. My mind came to my senses. He subconsciously explained to him, it's not what you think. He let go of me after hugging me. Justin Faulkner scoffed, interrupting me abruptly, in a jerky tone. You don't have to explain anything to me. Then he stared into my eyes and asked, he's your boyfriend, isn't he? I was silenced, and my heart felt like someone had pinched and twisted it hard. Justin Faulkner didn't look at me anymore, and drank quietly. I was bored with myself, thinking that he was now a girlfriend, and that I wasn't suitable for being alone with him anymore. He had just taken 2 steps when he turned around, and suddenly heard movement behind him. I'm about to turn back. In the next second, someone grabbed his wrist from behind, pulled it back, and pressed it against the wall. Justin Faulkner put some force on his hand, restrained me with both hands, and pinched my chin with the other, forcing me to look at him. The light was bright, and I could see his eyes red from the strength of the wine. His eyes were red, and he said word by word, when you smile at him, I'm going crazy. My heart beat faster and faster, as if I was on a high speed, leaving me breathless. Justin Faulkner leaned closer, his gaze narrow, Between breaths, the very close smell of sweet wine penetrated into my mouth and nose, making my hands and feet weak and my mind dizzy. I didn't drink, but I seemed drunk. The big palm around his waist was hot, and his hot breath sprayed on my face. Temperatures are rising. He lowered his head, and I closed my eyes, feeling the sweet smell getting closer. I waited for a long time, but I couldn't wait for his next move. I opened my eyes in confusion, and Justin Faulkner was froze with cold sweat on his forehead. His right hand clenched his fist against the wall. It's like he's desperately suppressing something. Half an hour later, my waist suddenly loosened. A chill from outside the balcony enveloped me through the glass doors. Justin Faulkner let go of me and sat back down, his voice hoarse like I had never heard before. Go back, he said. I gradually returned to my mind, and when I saw that he was going to drink again, I couldn't bear it, so I bent down and snatched the bottle. Actually, Virgil Pepis isn't my boyfriend. Facing the cold wind, I told the truth lightly. Justin Faulkner was stunned and looked sideways at me. The eyelashes fluttered gently like spring butterfly wings. He muttered, "What?" I decided to put an end to my crush for so many years, and I told me that I was going to find Virgil Pepis as a fake boyfriend to deal with my mom. As the words fell, someone suddenly laughed. I looked at him in bewilderment, only to see him leaning against the wall, and shaking his shoulders back and forth. What are you laughing at? I wondered. Justin Faulkner didn't answer me, and somehow pulled out his phone and handed it to me. I took it with a blank look on my face. In the dark, the phone screen suddenly lit up. I saw my back, his lock screen. It's my 16-year-old, wearing a ponytail and wearing a high school uniform, running against a pink and orange sunset. People may not be able to see it, but I can recognize it at a glance. Justin Faulkner. How could he? I jerked my head up and looked at him in a daze, incredulous. You. His eyes were sparkling, and he curled his lips and said to himself, "The password is your birthday." My fingers trembled uncontrollably, and I finally unlocked it after pressing it wrong for the 4th time. Justin Faulkner leaned over and slid his bony fingers across the screen to pull up a picture. When I saw it, I subconsciously blurted out, "Anne Hathaway." Justin Faulkner nodded and said something ridiculous. "This is the girlfriend I told your mom about." Me. Justin Faulkner shrugged and reluctantly explained the cause and effect to me. He was afraid that my mother would also arrange a blind date for him, so he casually found an excuse to block my mother's mouth. Good guys. It's good that my mom doesn't watch foreign movies, otherwise, he will die. Looking at his relaxed appearance of misunderstanding and clarification, I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, suddenly remembered something, squinted his eyes, and asked, "Who was the girl who was with you a few days ago?" Justin Faulkner was stunned for a moment, then came back to his senses and asked me, "Didn't you say you didn't go?" I touched the tip of my nose, and forcefully returned to the subject, "Don't digress." "Who the hell is that girl?" Justin Faulkner spread his hands at me, and raised an eyebrow. "My cousin, who grew up in United States. You fought with her when you were a child." I looked blank, frantically remembering the cousin he had in his mouth. A minute later, I failed. Justin Faulkner sighed and rummaged through the room to find a family photo. He pointed to the little girl next to him and said, "Think about it. She still has a scar on her knee, and she has to talk to you every time she sees me." Dusty memories are suddenly awakened. During the summer vacation of 4th grade, Justin Faulkner had a second high fever, and his parents rushed back from abroad. They were joined by a little girl about my age. The little girl has delicate facial features, and is wearing a beautiful princess dress, like a doll. The first time I saw her, I didn't dare to talk to her. Later, Justin Faulkner got better and came home, and every time I went to play with her, she would cry and clamor to join us. I used to be a mom in every house, and Justin Faulkner was forced by me to be a dad. As soon as she came, she robbed me of my mother's position. "You have to force me to be a father." How could I agree to this? This time, I finally got Justin Faulkner to put down the book and play with me, and Justin Faulkner went to the room to study again. I couldn't get angry, so I crossed my waist and reasoned with her. She couldn't argue and I kept crying, and then I grabbed my arm and bit it hard, and I pushed her in pain. She didn't stand still, rolled on the floor a few times, and finally hit the corner of the table with her knee, leaving a small scar. After that, the two of us became bitter enemies. As soon as we meet, we have to fight. Luckily, she didn't stay long before Justin Faulkner's parents sent her home, and I haven't seen her since. In retrospect, the pretty girl who was with Justin Faulkner at the mall that day was really like the annoying one she was when she was a kid. Little crying bag. Oh, it's her. No wonder it's so annoying. My teeth itch when I think of her. Justin Faulkner smiled and rubbed my head when he saw my mouth curling. My body stiffened, and there was irrepressible excitement in my eyes. When did you like me? Junior high school, or when you secretly took a picture of me? Why don't you confess to me all the time? Do you know how hard it is for me to have a crush on you? In the end, I couldn't help but redden, hammering his chest, and my voice was dyed with crying. Justin Faulkner grabbed my hand and looked down at me, looking attentive and serious. I don't know when I fell in love with you. At first I was just used to you following my ass. And then I would always think when I was alone in an empty room, if you weren't so lonely. When it's serious, when you see a girl with a ponytail, you think, will that person be you? He lowered his eyes and looked at me fixedly. I confess to you. After a pause, his face hurt and he added, but you rejected me? I'm blindsided. How is that possible? I blurted out. He smiled bitterly and muttered, you really forgot. I couldn't remember anything like that, and begged him to tell me about it. After graduating from the college entrance examination, at the class reunion, I was finally liberated, and I drank a lot of alcohol that night. That day, I wanted to go home and confess to Justin Faulkner with the courage of drinking. Unexpectedly, halfway through, I was confessed by others first. Ingemar Silas, a school bully, who sat at my table in high school for a year and often fought and skipped class, actually asked me to be his girlfriend. In front of the audience that night, I refused without thinking about it. He was hurt at the time, but he didn't force me to say yes. I didn't think much of it. Later, I drank too much, and while waiting for my girlfriend to go to the toilet in the hallway, Ingemar Silas got too drunk and came over to confess to me. Distraught, I firmly rejected him again. I thought he would give up, but I didn't expect that while waiting for Justin Faulkner to pick me up, he didn't give up. I yelled, I don't like you. I do not like you. Don't you understand, people? The wine came up, and I scolded very dirty. I didn't know how to get home that night, and I woke up the next day and forgot about it. Later, I tried to confess to Justin Faulkner, but he kept avoiding me. Even when we met, he always looked at me with detachment and evasion. I will never be able to say that confession again. I'm afraid that after I say that, he won't pay attention to me again. I think you're a fool of Ingemar Silas. And I'll just say, why doesn't he smell of sweat? I was dumbfounded. I didn't expect that my love would be buried by my own kiss before it began. A minute later, Justin Faulkner finished his mental construction, kissed me on the forehead and began to mentally construct me. I wanted to rush out and beat up Ingemar Silas. If it weren't for him, I would have kissed Justin Faulkner 3 years ago. Instead of having a spring dream every time to solve my lovesick pain. Woo woo. The more I thought about it, the more angry I became, and finally I couldn't help crying. Justin Faulkner hugged me into his arms in distress, and I immediately stopped crying and quietly stuck my head out of his arms, staring at his thin lips. The demon sent the god to say, can you kiss me? As soon as I said that, I regretted it, but I also hated the loss of 3 years of good life. So his head shrank back, revealing only a pair of big eyes full of anticipation. Justin Faulkner coughed lightly, and the roots of his ears turned red. He bent over and held my face in both hands, his fingertips trembling slightly, staring at me, breathing heavily. It seems that he can no longer restrain himself, suppressing the beast in his body. I closed my eyes and felt the sweet smell of him envelop and swallow me little by little. A chill on my lips sent a faint aroma of wine to Justin Faulkner's lips and teeth, and I hurriedly responded to him, but he pressed the back of his head and slowly deepened the kiss. At the end of the kiss, I was hugged by him to the couch. The first time I did such a thing, I was thrilled and frightened, but my hands restlessly reached into the depths of his clothes, touch it non-stop. Justin Faulkner grabbed my hand and moved his hand frequently, and his Adam's apple rolled. After I made an aggrieved and shameless request to touch it one last time, he suddenly opened my hand and clasped my fingers tightly, and pressed it down. This time the kiss was fierce. The moon is weightless, and the evening breeze is hot. You have come to me from behind the Milky Way, And I have sunk for you with starlight.